Hello everyone, I'm Diane Valla-Broderick. I'm the Deputy Director of the Centre for Positive Psychology, and I'm involved in leading the research at the Centre. On behalf of all the staff at the Centre, good evening and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. I would like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I pay respect to the elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. I want to make special mention of some important guests who have played such an important role in setting up this centre. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Dean, Professor Field Rickards, for his encouragement and constant support. John Higgins and his family for backing the centre on so many levels. And the Centre for Positive Psychology board members, the research associates and fellows who generously provide their time and energy and knowledge to the centre. So thank you so much. Also, all the people who've helped organise this event, including our centre coordinator, Grace Fiore, who has been the lead organiser today, as well as our lovely MAP volunteers, our Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program volunteers, Rhiannon, Roz and Susan, as well as Jacinta Ridge. If you'd like to thank them in the organisation skills, that would be wonderful. When the centre was first established, we had high hopes that our work will create positive, real-world change, particularly for young people and education systems. In more recent times, those hopes are turning into reality. This is particularly evident from the high level of interest we have attracted for our education programs, the research we undertake, and all the public engagements that we're involved with. And I think the turnout today is testament to that, where we have a full house and overflowing into the next room as well. I am delighted and honoured to launch our Centre for Positive Psychology public lecture series. And speaking of high hopes, our first speaker of the series, Associate Professor Michael Steger, is not only high in stature, at 6'6", may I add, but also high on international recognition and praise for his work examining and measuring meaning in life. Michael is an Associate Professor of Counselling Psychology and Applied Social Psychology at Colorado State University. He's also the Director for the Laboratory for the Study of Meaning and Quality of Life. He has published more than 100 peer-reviewed journal articles and scholarly book chapters. The books he's published include Designing Positive Psychology, Purpose and Meaning in the Workplace and the Wiley Blackwell Handbook of Strengths and Positivity in the Workplace. He's currently the co-editor of the journal Psychology of Wellbeing, and he's developed the Work and Meaning Inventory and the Meaning in Life Questionnaire, which is one of the most widely used measures of meaning and purpose in life in the world. Today, Michael is presenting on what science tells us about the advantages of living a meaningful life. Please join me in welcoming Associate Professor Michael Steger.
It's always fun for a hug. Okay, so today this is a huge honor. I want to express a lot of thanks to everyone who Diane already mentioned, who makes it possible for me to be here. It's really it's a treasure for me to be here because I admire so many people who work here. They're dear to me, Diane, Lindsay, Lee. We've known each other for a couple of years going now, and at least from my perspective, it's quite an admiration society for what you all do. And the center is certainly globally an important thing in the landscape of trying to understand what makes life worth living, what makes people function better, and what makes society be able to deliver more to more people. So it's really at the forefront of what's happening anywhere in the world that you might look. So this is the talk I'm going to give. I'm going to jump in. We're going to have a little bit, because one of the interesting pieces of being here today is that I'm here at an interesting moment for Australia itself, and I've been asked to serve as an expert advisor to Action for Happiness Australia. So you are here, and me too. And so how do we create bridges and reach across? Well, we're going to not only have me here and all of you here, but we're going to get a little bit of London here as well. So to introduce the idea of Action for Happiness Australia and the launch, which is coming up on Sunday, we're going to start with a little bit of video, and then I'll kind of go into my little thing on meaning in life.
Hello, my name is Mark Williamson. I'm Director of Action for Happiness, and I am absolutely delighted to be recording this message of support for all of you at the launch of Action for Happiness Australia. This is a really exciting time for us because our movement is going not just from country to country, but all around the world. And this month we're not only seeing your fantastic launch in Australia, but also we have Action for Happiness launching in the Netherlands and activities growing increasingly in lots of different countries. So thank you so much for being part of this. For those of you who don't already know what Action for Happiness is about, we're a movement of people united by a common belief that happiness really matters. It matters to us individually, but it also matters for our society and our priorities more generally. And actually, crucially, we believe that each of us can make a difference, that we can be happier ourselves, but we can also contribute to our schools, our communities, and our workplaces. So that's what we do with Action for Happiness. We help people take action to contribute to that kinder and happier world that we all would like to be part of. So we have volunteers running courses and various events in lots of communities. And we also have lots of resources. So, for example, this evening I'm delighted to be at the launch of this brilliant new book about the 10 keys to happier living. And hopefully many of you in Australia can be using these ideas and helping us take them out to people who've not heard them yet. But we also put on lots of live events, and as you can now see behind me, we are here with a fantastic room full of people taking action, getting involved in London here this evening. And so, friends, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our friends in Australia joining the Action for Happiness family. Good luck. We wish you so much luck and look forward to hearing all the amazing things you do to help create a happier world. Thank you.
Not too shabby, right? Other than his horrible fashion sense, he seems like a really nice guy. I mean, I don't know where he got that jacket from. So Action for Happiness officially is launching here in Australia. You can go down to Fed Square this Sunday to see the activities that are going on. There's a couple of people in the room who are involved. Jo Mitchell, I've lost her now, but she's somewhere out there. There she is, she knows. Lindsay Odes is on the board for Action for Happiness Australia. And like I said, I'll be involved on an ongoing basis as an advisor and just trying to pitch in type of guy. So it's really exciting to see these informal, really advocacies for a better society types of groups emerge. It's not just about how much happiness can I get and shovel inside my pockets of my suit. It's how much happiness can we spread and how much well-being, achievement, equality, and opportunity can we create for all of us sharing in our society. So I'm really eager to be a part of that. Unfortunately, I won't be here on Sunday, but I'm sure it's going to be smashing. Okay, so this is the talk. What science tells us about the advantages of living a meaningful life. And upon reflection, the first thing I thought of when I typed that title into the slide was this: The Personal History, Adventures, Experience, and Observation of David Copperfield the Younger of Blunderstone Rookery, which he never meant to publish on any account. We know it as David Copperfield, right? So sometimes too much title is too much title. So really we're just going to talk about a meaningful life today. And I always like to start with this picture of the universe. Do you ever think about the universe, or at least our galaxy? This is clearly not a picture of our galaxy. We don't really have a way to take a picture of our galaxy. But we're in there somewhere. If you really probe into what this all means, this means that a collection of atoms, some time in the distant past, collided and collided and recollided until somehow all these minds were able to come together in this room. I became curious. What is the book value of a human, right? So as economists, if you dismantle a company, you get a book value. So what's the book value of a human? What are we made of? Now this is not like, if you could somehow sell an eyeball, that's worth a lot more money. Kidney's worth a lot of money. Of course, the thoughts in your head are priceless, trust me. But this is just what happens if you break us down into our smallest parts. So we're mostly oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, potassium. You may have been wondering, yes, indeed, you have some sulfur in you and sometimes around you. We also have some gold, some platinum, but in tiny, tiny little amounts. So basically, what we have to work with is a little handful of elements. And somehow that makes us work. Now, you can sell the components of your body for about 2,600 Australian dollars, if you'd like to. I think that's not bad. That's actually more than I was thinking I was worth. I didn't know that calcium's getting very expensive on the market. So that's where your best bet is. So grow many bones as you can. Now, if you're thinking that's not much, look what you can get for $2,600. I don't exactly know. We don't have Holden in the US, unfortunately, so I don't know how awesome a Holden Commodore Lumina VX2 Auto is. It seems the mileage, it's been around the block a couple times. But you get that in 2 pints if you were able to somehow decompose yourself and find industrial supply company that needs a lot of calcium. So I think that's pretty good. That's a score in my book. But we obviously do so much more than that, don't we? We do more than just compose atoms into molecules, molecules into substances, substances into fluids, all this sort of stuff. And to me, it becomes striking how much we can actually accomplish. And to me, meaning is the way that we do that. So I'm just going to sort of bring us down a little bit and think about what happened when 2 people from my own country, many people around the world are just as important, obviously, but 2 people from my country in the same year, 1968, lost that spark that is us. And you can see we've got Dr. Martin Luther King. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? That was really the theme of where he was going as the civil rights movement advanced. And we see Robert F. Kennedy. GDP measures everything except that which is worthwhile. The impact that these 2 gentlemen had, particularly Martin Luther King, was massive. And it wasn't because of the atoms we're made of. It's because of what we do. It's because of how we live. It's because of what we try to put into the world. And so when you reduce us to our molecules, it's pretty amazing what we can really accomplish. And for me, that's the biggest miracle of all. If you go back to the beginnings of human history and human culture, at least as it's written down, the earliest mention of anything kind of meaning-like comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh. But the earliest mention of meaning in translation comes from the Hebrew, the Judeo-Christian Bible, the Book of Wisdom, which is really a bummer. If you've read it, wisdom basically means being sad all the time, as far as I can tell in Ecclesiastes. But this is the first contemplation of what human life means. I also thought, as for men, God tests them so that they may see that they are like the animals. It's either after a good start if you're an environmentalist, or a not so good start if you think humans are special. Man's fate is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Man has no advantage over the animal. Everything is meaningless. So the first time we take a step back as a species, at least as far as I could find, is to say, whoa, the fragility of life renders it meaningless. The fact that we turn into what we see in the butcher shop when we're done means it's all meaningless, that we can be decomposed into a set of atoms somehow makes it meaningless. And I would argue this is exactly what makes it meaningful, that we do so much with so little, particularly when we work together. Now, in the face of that ephemeral existence that we have in the grand scheme of history, right? So if I showed you a pie chart of the average human length of life for the planet's life, you can't see the sliver that is us. Right? So we really are truly insignificant if we want to take that view. But we all, in some ways, want to leave a mark. These are cave paintings, ancient cave paintings, almost pre-human, right? Where we weren't sure who's Neanderthal and who's Homo sapiens. We see time and time again, people just want to leave a mark. And I know that societies around the world use the handprint, the sign of a human's touch, a human's presence, to convey all sorts of important information. But that urge to make our mark, to reach out, to have some impact on the world, also finds some interesting experiences. So this is the Temple of Luxor, right? 5,000 or 6,000 year old carving. And someone said, hey, I was here too. Ding Jing Hao visited here. This is just a few years ago. We have this urge. I was walking through the botanical gardens, and on the leaves of aloe plants, people are carving their initials, right? We carve our initials, we leave our mark. We want to have an impact. We don't want to just be compiled as atoms and dissipate as elements, right? So we really want to do something. And to me, that's what meaning is all about. And maybe the key is to reframe how we're going about things and look for better opportunities. I love this slide for so many reasons, but if someone from the 1950s suddenly appeared today, what would be the most difficult thing to explain to them about life today? I think the first thing is that apparently people of today don't think anyone from the 1950s could possibly still be alive, which is depressing, right? Did anyone from the 1950s suddenly appear here tonight? I know both my folks did. Well, not here, but they're still around. So I think that's an interesting little moment of temporal chauvinism. But still, okay. So we possess in our pocket a device that is capable of accessing the entirety of information known to humanity, which is amazing to think about, right? What would Socrates have done with that, or Galileo? I use it to take a look at pictures of cats and get in arguments with strangers. Is there a parallel with our lives as a whole? Have we been given this amazing device that can access and expand upon the entirety of human knowledge, and do we use it to argue about, assume all the arguments are about the cat pictures? So is that what we do? I think we can certainly ask for more. So what I want to talk about, it's not you are here, which is sort of indisputable unless you're a hardcore solipsistic philosopher. But why are you here? Why am I here? What are we going to do to answer that question, why am I here? So I'm going to show you the why, the what, and the how of a meaningful life. The why. Why should we care? Doesn't meaning in life seem a little fuzzy, a little woo-wah? Does that phrase translate woo-wah? Doesn't it seem a little out there? Is this really a thing for us to study with science? So the first thing we have to ask of meaning is, does it matter? Does it matter at all? Should we pay any attention to it? Should I worry if my life is empty of purpose and significance, or should I be doing things to make sure that I have some impact and purpose in my life? Well, the quick answer is yes. In fact, hundreds of studies consistently show that all the good stuff that the Center for Positive Psychology is concerned about, well-being psychologists are concerned about, public health officials and professionals are concerned about, all that stuff is related to meaning. Sometimes you can show that meaning points an arrow to those things. Sometimes you show the arrow goes backwards. But all the good stuff in life is nestled right next to meaning. So where meaning is, so is positivity, benevolence, altruism, happiness, contentment. But maybe you think that's not important. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Well, that's good, because a meaningful life appears also to be a healthier life. We know health is a huge challenge. In day-to-day life, it's a huge challenge for societies, particularly as we age, particularly as we confront global epidemics that seem to race around the world in record time. But meaning appears to serve a critical role in maintaining our health. It protects us from stress. You can see all these different ways, right? It's both mental stress like PTSD, but also the basic biological adaptations that we have to stress. So we've got lower physiological reactivity, so we're not quite so when something happens. We have lower blood pressure. We have lower levels of these interleukins, these inflammatory cytokines, right? These things that are related to heart disease, to bowel problems, to joint problems, all throughout the body. People with meaning in their lives have lower levels of those. We see more robust CD4 and killer T cells, so we have a better functioning immune system when we have meaning. So that's important. When we think about public policy and the threats that we worry about our kids encountering or falling victim to, we see that meaning seems to give us a reason to be healthy too. It helps us reduce our tobacco, alcohol, and other drug use. It encourages us to have better sleep, better diet, better nutrition, better exercise regimens in our lives. And it helps us manage illness and healthcare better. So there's some fascinating studies taking a look at how people interact with the healthcare system. So the United States has a little bit of a peculiar healthcare system where you definitely don't want to get sick because you could lose your house paying for it, but we want people to engage in preventative healthcare. You know, follow-up, check-up, annual physical. People with high sense of meaning in life do that. People with low sense of meaning in life, they don't. They wait until it's so bad that something needs to be done, which is, of course, a much more expensive way and worse way to manage health. I'll admit, maybe I haven't persuaded you yet that meaning is a thing. You came here, but I can tell you're a bunch of skeptics, right? So you want to know, rubber meets the road, what happens if I have meaning versus if I don't? Well, it looks like a decent shot that you'll live longer if you think your life is meaningful. So we're going to take a look at just one study among many, up to over a dozen at this point now, longitudinal studies that take a snapshot of how people are doing now and then see what happens later, and then tries to create equal, compatible groups with just one difference. In this case, we just have one difference here. We're going to see a blue bar grow, and that's going to be the people who really have a lot of meaning in their lives. We're going to see a red bar grow, and those are going to be the people that have very little meaning in their lives. On the vertical axis, we see the hazard ratio for dying. Now, we all know, hopefully you're okay with this idea, that we will all die someday. We'd like to reduce those odds. We seem pretty interested in those sorts of tasks. So what we're going to see is that over time, people's hazard of dying, their likelihood of dying in any given time frame increases. That's just a fact of life. But what does meaning do to that gap? So you see it growing over 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, and you see that the hazard of dying drastically outpaces the hazard of dying for those who are low in meaning compared to those who are high. And it creates a gap after 5 years that's equivalent to a 57% reduced hazard for dying in just 5 years. That adds up to about half the number of people would die who have a lot of meaning than who don't. And this controls for other things too, right? Again, if a good skeptic's going to say, well, there's lots of things that explain when we die, and here's some of them. Depression, level of physical disability, neurotic personality traits, that tendency to be gloomy and very negatively reactive to stress, and also number of chronic medical conditions as well as income. If you hold all those things equal, still, that's the 57% lower hazard of dying. So somewhere along the road, meaning is at play in longevity. And again, this is meaning measured here, and let's see what happens down here. It's not a perfect study because you can't do an experiment and like try to kill people, right? That's not okay to do anymore. So we don't do those studies. We just kind of have to wait and see what happens. But there's a dozen studies that are very similar to this. This one happens to control for the most potential other explanatory factors. So it's at least tenable to think that those who have meaning in their lives will live longer. Now, is that the best outcome we can hope for, though? Right? Decades-old vampire seducing 17-year-old girl. Like, if you want a movie that will terrify a parent of a daughter, it's this whole Twilight series, right? So there's like these ancient vampires, they're hanging out in high school, because if you're hundreds of years old and that mature, that's where you want to be, high school students. No offense to the high school students, but there's sometimes maturity gaps between high schoolers and adults. But anyways, this old vampire likes that, and he always tells this love interest of his that he might at any moment kill her. And the great romantic moment for her is, I don't care. Right? That's the message we want to send. Anyway, so if what you want to do is be a creaky old zombie or vampire who lives forever, that's one thing, but maybe we want better lives as well. And we can look to health research for this in the same way. Alzheimer's disease. If you ask people what terrifies them about aging, it's not long before you get to Alzheimer's disease. The erasure of our memories, the erasure of our sense of who we are, our connection to our family, our understanding of ourselves. The brain deteriorates, the tissues that support those processes disappear. What we can show is a very similar sort of progression. This is a different sample of people, but people who are high in meaning have about a third of the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease over a given time frame than those who are low in meaning. Starting at the same spot, right? Again, we're not going to give Alzheimer's disease to someone to see if purpose in life or meaning in life protects them. So we just observe what happens in the natural world. But time and time again, we see something interesting. And it actually goes beyond this as well. Because we know that one of the major factors for Alzheimer's disease are what's called neurofibrillary tangles. That's a word you should never say in a public presentation because it's so easy to go wrong. But these neurofibrillary tangles are made out of these tau proteins. If you look at neurodegenerative diseases, tau proteins come up all over the place. They're in Pick's disease, they're in all sorts of things. And what happens is all of the proteins that are keeping the structure of our neurons intact start to fray. Like you think of like a nylon rope, a climbing rope. Once that thing starts to fray, it's never the same. Or a shoelace, you lose the tip, or your kids do, right? And then it just tangles up. And so what happens is it tangles up around the neuron dies. A healthy neuron looks like this, a diseased neuron looks like that. If we take a look in the brain, people have done these studies as well. They've taken biopsies to look for the presence of neurofibrillary tangles. They're pretty easy to see, right? We want our brains to look like this, nice, healthy, plump neurons. That's the body of the neuron, and they're going to extend signal transmission lines and signal receipt lines all throughout the brain. Hundreds of billions of those types of synapses. And this is not going to transmit signals. So, there are no differences between these slides. Okay, you're like, this isn't like what one little thing is different here. Oh, the man's not wearing a shirt, right? So no, they're the same for a point, because controlling for the physical manifestation of Alzheimer's disease in the brain, does purpose still make a difference? Same physiological impact of the tangles. And what do we care about then? We care about cognitive functioning. So Alzheimer's, a disease, is terrifying because of its impact on our cognitive functioning. So same levels of neurofibrillary tangles in the brain of people high in meaning, we do see a cognitive decline. People low in meaning, we see more than double the rate of cognitive decline over time. Again, controlling for exactly how much Alzheimer's is physically damaging the brain. So something interesting is happening with purpose in life that gives us some sort of cognitive capacity, even in the face of physical deterioration. We don't know what that is. There's lots of hypotheses, but that's not a nothing finding. That somehow preserving our sense of who we are in the face of Alzheimer's disease might be supported by purpose and meaning in life. Okay, I'm hoping that's enough for the why. You're at least willing to concede that there's potentially something here about this meaning and purpose stuff. So what are we really talking about? There's a few different factors. I think it can be boiled down to three simple ideas. Idea one, coherence. Our life needs to make sense. A life that feels like chaos, constantly out of control. I don't understand what's happening to me. I never seem to be able to catch my breath. I don't know who I am. I don't know what life's all about. That's not going to feel meaningful, is it? It's going to feel frustrating at best. Significance. We want to have a life that matters. We want to feel like it's all worthwhile in the end, that our life has some sort of value. We don't want to feel debased. We don't want to feel insignificant. We don't want to feel like nothing. And finally, purpose. Not just the need to do something. We don't want to fidget constantly, just do stuff. We want to do something worthy. And I think about that as we want to do something worthy of the fact that somehow all these elements were animated for just us. Whatever your belief system is, this is the only crack you get at living in this body, in this world right now. Don't you want to do something that stands up to that challenge, to that trillion in one shot at being you? So that's what purpose seems to get at. Doing something too. Thinking that the world makes sense, feeling that your life matters, and trying to do something that's worthy. Now the making sense piece is pretty easy, right? We just do this all the time. We can't even stop it maybe. So what is this? Horse, yeah, right? So it's pretty easy. It looks like it was drawn by a third grader. It's Pablo somebody, I can't really remember the name. My kid could do that, right? But you'll see, he has a way, Pablo Picasso obviously has a way of evoking with minimal hints something very rich in our minds. And it uses an apparatus in the brain for making sense and interpreting what's happening to us that's incredibly robust. If I'm standing like this, should I be nervous about what you guys are doing behind me? That facial expression tells us important things about the world. If I'm trying to, let's say, hey, let's go for a walk in the jungle, and that face comes out, I shouldn't push the point. This is a non-starter idea, right? So we rapidly gain tons of information from very, very minute cues, and that is what helps us interact and work together as a species. Now we take a slightly different facial expression, right? So what is this person expressing to us? Joy. Seems happy, right? This is a better face to see, the expression-wise, right? So we can do that from very, very early ages. Even infants can tell if we're mad or if we're happy, if we're mom or dad, or if we're someone else raising that person, or if we're a stranger altogether. Instantly and effortlessly, we make sense of the world around us. Maybe we can't even turn it off sometimes. We can't help ourselves. These 4 lines, does this look like anything to anybody? Again, it's this guy. It's not my fault. He's the one who drew it. Maybe this says something. Does anyone know what this might be? Is anyone going to hazard this? Am I transgressing a cultural norm here to talk about this? The only reason I want to say it, because I want to say this joke that doesn't make any sense in America, I want to say, I'm being a little cheeky here, right? Because we don't say that, right? So this is really a little self-serving. I apologize, right? We can't help what we see here. This is a, would you say a bum? Is that what you? Yeah. Okay, we'd say booty maybe. Okay, so it brings a lot of other things with it. We're not really expecting to see something like this in a serious talk about meaning in life, but it also raises all sorts of things in our head. We have this rapidly expanding associative network. Once you start thinking about bottoms, maybe you don't stop. Maybe you wonder about other people's bottoms around here. Maybe you wonder about if anyone's wondering about your bottom. Maybe you're reflecting on the best and worst bottoms you've seen in your life. Maybe you're tired of sitting already, right? And you're like concerned about the health and well-being of your bottom. Whatever it is, things start to happen in our brain and we can't necessarily rule the day with it all, right? We're making sense of life all the time. We just want to make good sense. We want to make healing sense, generative sense of what happens in life. We also want to have a life that matters. Now, you may have seen one or more of these devices in the past week or so. The mobile phone and the TV. What would modern life be like without it? Well, I think we're going to find out what life is like without this, but we're probably not going to, for a long time, find out what life is like without a cell phone. So who invented these? I know is on the tip of your tongue, Martin Cooper and Philo T. Farnsworth, right? The earliest patent holders for the things that became mobile phones and televisions. Did they impact life? Yeah. They changed everything. Sometimes we get so excited by the idea of what they've changed, right? The Arab Spring, the cell phone revolution, the Twitter revolution, the ability to find lost loved ones after disaster. Never was possible in the same way as it is now. TV, you could never find out what it's like to be in a country where someone named Donald Trump might actually be president someday without TV. If he does become president, you'll find out fast what that's like. But if, in the meantime, we can enjoy it as a sort of fantasy, right? So TV is impactful too, but we don't have to know who these people are. We don't have to be famous. We don't even have to invent cell phones or TVs. We can just do the right thing at the right time. No one ever knows us, but we made an impact. Because making an impact is knowing that we did something that helps someone else. It doesn't have to win us accolades. So there's lots of ways to have a life that matters. And one of the ways is to follow our purpose. One of the great paragons in human history of purpose and perseverance, 26 years in prison, many years of being jailed, threatened, injured prior to that, and then this glorious moment of overseeing maybe one of the most remarkable transitions from a completely topsy-turvy world into a world of hope in the governance of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. It always seems impossible until it's done. That's the thing about purpose. You don't have to feel like you're going to check off your purpose in life in the next week or 5 years. It's something you're willing to commit to for a long haul. In Nelson Mandela's case, almost all of his entire life from his mid-20s on was devoted to the same cause. That's like 6 decades. That's pretty good, right? It doesn't have to be quite that important. But if we take a look at what the good elements of a strong purpose in your life are, we take a look at how long we expect to be spending on them. Now, an intention. Everyone here probably had an intention of coming, and you did it, right? You were like, I'm going to go to that thing today, and you made it. So that's an intention. You pretty much can check that off the list. You really only need to have it in your mind when that moment is right. A goal will last a little bit longer. For some people, maybe the goal is passing a test, passing a class in the semester, closing a business deal, finding a place to live, getting your kids the right size soccer boots, whatever it is. These are goals that last a little bit longer. And then we've got life tasks, getting your PhD, right? Getting the kids launched into their independent lives. Things that are going to last for a little while, obtaining a promotion at work, starting a new center, right? All these sorts of things, they're life tasks. They're going to take a lot of work, but you'll get to the end of it. You don't have to get to the end of purpose. The importance of purpose is not achieving it and finishing it. It's in the way that purpose helps direct all the other aspects of our life if we really commit to it. And that's where personal relevance becomes so important. You can't pick a purpose that's wrong for you. You can have all sorts of intentions that are wrong for you. I intend to remember where my car was parked. I intend to pay my taxes. I intend to do all sorts of things that they're just things you do. They don't have to be personally involved for you. Same thing with goals. In fact, one of the biggest tricks about achieving a goal is to try to make it personally relevant, because so many of us have goals that are just, they're just generic goals. Like, who wants to be a little bit healthier? Who wants to be a little bit, more patient with people while you're driving? We have all sorts of goals. What makes them easier to obtain and work towards is the idea that we make them increasingly personally relevant. They become central to who we are, and then also our whole apparatus for regulating and directing our behavior and maintaining our behavior in the face of obstacles kicks in. And so when you think about purpose, it has to be almost a perfect fit with who you think you are at any given time. You can have more than one purpose, right? So a lot of us might have a purpose of being a great partner. We might have a purpose of being a great parent. We might have a purpose of trying to be great in our careers and make impact that way. They could all three be happening at the same time. In some ways, you won't really be done with any of those, but the relative importance and the proximity, like the press of each of those individual goals and purposes will ebb and flow with life as it goes. But it should be really important to you. You can't really do a purpose unless you're willing to commit action to it. And you can't really commit a lot of action to something unless it's really going to be a good fit for you. Okay, so if we imagine for a second that I've convinced you that meaning in life is these three things, that potentially it has impacts on your health, on your happiness, I'll let you know that it seems to have impacts on the quality of your relationships. So for instance, one of the most interesting stories, I think, from the meaning in life research is meaning in sex. So in committed couples, meaning is related to some sexual pieces, but not others. It's not at all related to frequency of sexual contact between two committed partners, but it's strongly related to satisfaction with sex life in established relationships. So meaning is about the quality of what we're doing in our lives, not the quantity. So that's another important thing to happen, to have in our minds as we go through how we obtain meaning. It's not going to be about getting more, it's about doing better with what we have already. So where might we look? Well, let's start looking around the world, and there's a very special person in the room, Diane Broderick, who contributed to this specific research, which I always love to show. If you ask people, where does meaning come from? And you ask them all around the world, 15 nations, I think, in this study, you see some themes emerge, in particular this family theme. Now, if we were to take a quick trip into the future, let's say 50 years, when we're increasingly urban population, when family sizes keep shrinking, when intergenerational households keep reducing, we're going to see that probably family still is at the top of the list, but it's going to be a different understanding of family. There's just something about those relationships we've had over the years, maybe even with people we wouldn't choose, right? Family isn't the people that you love because you chose to love them, it's people you love because they're your family, right? So there's something super strong about that and persistent across cultures and across time. But then we have work. A good number of people find meaning through their work. It's a great way to contribute to society, isn't it? And then as we go along, we see other types of relationships, health, growth. Standard of living is one that sometimes in cultures where relatively high standard of living is accessible to a higher proportion of people, we don't always think about how important just having a safe and secure standard of living is. All the way down to education. We'd obviously, especially in this context, like to see this a little bit higher. But we'll say that people just forgot to mention it. Okay, well, that's what we'll say. So we can ask this question. If I want more meaning in life, where do most people find it? In family. So go get some more family. Just go get some. There's probably an online website where you can just rack up all sorts of family members. So that's one way to do it. Or take on a second, third, fourth, fifth job? Obviously not, right? So meaning isn't about getting more, it's about doing better. So we can do better. We can invest more into our family. We can invest more into our work. We can invest more into our interpersonal relationships. We can invest more into our health, and so on and so forth. I like to think about meaning in terms of the spiral. That there's a lot of ideas out there in the media, out there in the culture that get us to think that it's really important to do what we really feel like doing right now for ourselves. I need this right now. I don't want to do that right now, so I'm not going to do it. I really want this, I'll buy it. I don't want to do that, I won't even look at it. Right? There's a lot about what's happening to you right now. But we can get bigger and broader. We can go higher and wider. So we'll start with a couple ideas that you can play around with for meaning within us. We'll move to meaning between us. And finally, we'll talk about some little tricks that you might try for meaning among all of us. So, how do you find meaning within you? Well, if you're like most people, you would say that you already have a pretty good level of meaning in life. The average meaning score around the world is well above no meaning, well above I don't even know if I have meaning. It's in life's pretty meaningful, so that's good. We start off from a good place for most of us. But if we want to get a little bit deeper into it, we can take a look at where in our lives might meaning be coming from. Two quick little things you can do. So the first one is on fire. And this is, in Colorado, a big deal because every once in a while everything does kind of burst into flame. It's a fairly dry area. Although, did you have good snow? Good. We need the snowpack. If the snowpack doesn't come, then everyone starts buying emergency supplies because they think there's going to be a fire. So, what if you're away from home, you get a call, hey, you got to get to your house. You've got about 5 minutes to grab everything because the whole neighborhood's going up and they're locking it down. What would you grab? Just do that exercise. Put yourself in that house. Put yourself in the place where you live, that you inhabit. What there tells you it's most important to you, that it needs to be grabbed. Oftentimes I'll get interesting answers, photographs, photo albums, photo discs, external storage devices, laptops, right? You start to see some generational shifts. Cats, Lord knows what a cat will do during a fire. Dogs, other pets. No one ever said fish. I don't know why they think the fish is going to get away. People say husbands. No one's ever said wife, right? I think there's a little gender imbalance in what we expect of, responsibility maybe coming through there. But whatever it is that you would grab first, there's a clue to what makes life meaningful for you in that. The things that you'll take when it's really under pressure, that's the stuff that's important to you. Now, another way to explore that is what I call the mind's eye. This is really simple too. Take your cell phone, give yourself a limit of like 10 photos, take a week, and take 10 photos of the things that really scream to you meaning in my life. Maybe it's a picture of a picture of you and your family by the Eiffel Tower or the Great Wall of China. Or maybe it's a picture of a blanket your grandmother embroidered. Or maybe it's even a picture of one of your children, right? Whatever it is, you go through your day and you take your pictures and then you try to articulate with somebody else, someone you can trust, why that's meaningful to you. You might feel a little vulnerable doing that. We don't often talk about such deep matters like, kid, you're really meaningful to me and here's why. They're like, got bananas all over their face, or they know what you're talking about. But we can take some time to start conversations about this as well. It's also important to know yourself. This is not my idea, by the way. It's important to know yourself. The Oracle at Delphi beat me to it, just like that one guy beat me to my tan jacket. I'm always late on the scene, but I recognize a good idea when I see it. So the heart of knowing ourselves, strengths. You hear a lot about that, right? What are you good at? What are your best ways, most natural ways of making a positive impact on the world around you? There's many ways to explore this. What was your best day like and what did you do to make it that way? You can ask people you love and trust and who aren't too snarky what your best personal characteristics are. You can think about when you felt most natural, all these sorts of ideas. But our strengths are going to be maybe the first line of us reaching out into the world and making a positive impact. But they don't tell us what we should try to make an impact on. That's where values come in. I like to think of values as the things that we would stand for, the things we stand up for. Something happens in our environment, and we have to make a stand on that because of who we are, how we're composed, all the way down to the core of ourselves. If we're not doing something with those things that are most important to us, then we're missing an opportunity to build a meaningful life. You can have all sorts of great other types of lives, but I think meaningful life has to come from something that's really consistent with our values, with that little voice in there that says that's not right, or that is right, or I want more of this in the world and I'm willing to work for it. So values, we don't talk a lot about that because no one wants to be told what value they should have. So I'm not telling you what value you should have, I'm just asking you maybe to spend a little time, more than you maybe already do, thinking about what values you do have. Okay, the meaning between us. Appreciative conversations. So this is almost the reflexive side of having that conversation that you might think about having with those photos. You can ask people what gives their lives meaning. I do this as a living, in a sense, right? Like, what makes your life meaningful? How meaningful is your life? Have you ever thought about your purpose in life? And people don't always like that. So again, I start with someone that you can trust, that's not too snarky, but just ask them, give them the space to be appreciated for having whatever qualities we think of it would maybe take to think about meaning in life. It's not so rarefied of a thing. It's not just a domain of philosophers and the clergy and people making huge impacts on the world. It's a domain of all of us. So just start a little conversation. And as they tell you information, appreciatively affirm that. Show that you're engaging with what's important to them, even if it's rudimentary, even if they're shy about it, even if it makes you feel kind of diminished because their meaning is so awesome and you're just still kind of like a little pitiful. I feel that way quite a lot too. So whatever it is, let's appreciate what we see when it comes to meaning in other people. So that means starting conversations and making it normal to talk about these sorts of things. Sharing. Mentor and be mentored. I think a lot of us who in this room, I would just guess, maybe are better mentors than mentees. We really want to go help people figure out what's going on, and we forget that by being helped, we give a gift to someone. When we have a great relationship with someone who's accepting our mentorship, don't we feel like we've done something important? So why wouldn't we want to let other people feel that way as well? Unless you're the one person who's at the top of performance in every category, there's someone who can give you some information on how to do things in a way that you might appreciate better. And it's a gift. It's also a gift that keeps on giving because we learn how to be a better mentor when we open ourselves up to being mentored by someone else. Like, oh, that sucked when that person did that. I think, wait a second, I do that a lot. Maybe I'll stop doing that. Oh, I really liked it when that person addressed this topic in this way. So then we create reciprocating loops of mentorship. Same thing with challenge and be challenged. If you don't exactly feel full of ideas about what to do that would make your life more zesty, more exciting, deeper, crowdsource it. Ask your friends, what are the 10 most inspiring things you've seen or done in the last month? What are the 10 can't miss experiences you've had in your lifetime? What are the 10 most inspiring people that you've heard about? What can you learn from that? And be challenged to try to do a little bit of that sort of thing and do the same thing for others. Again, people that you feel close to and can trust and won't take it the wrong way. Say, hey, why don't we both try to do something totally new this week? Maybe a little risky, maybe a little bit on the edge, but we'll try to do something fun and challenging to grow together. And finally, finding meaning among all of us. So as we grow from what's going to happen and come from within and really benefit me to you and me, meaning pulls us out of our own skin. Meaning makes us confront whether we're doing enough for everybody. It's not like your typical positive emotion, let's say. It's not going to just be contained within us and maybe spread and make other people smile. It's about making a difference in the end. Making a difference requires a little bit of investment of time and effort. It might even be harder than not trying. But that's how all of our great problems get solved, is when people come together and try to make a difference that benefits everyone, not just ourselves. So, does your purpose look inward or outward? Are you about self-improvement, getting bigger pectoral muscles, running the marathon faster, learning to surf for a 9th try? whatever it is, right? So if the purpose is about that, that's okay. That's still a purpose. Is there any way to tweak it to either bring someone along on your journey or find a beneficiary that can, all your effort can also help someone as well? So how can you help people you know, neighbors, strangers, future generations, the planet? There's lots of ways to do what we like to do that then also contribute. You can go on your 10K, you can go on your marathon, maybe do it as part of a fundraising thing. Maybe do it as a way to raise awareness of something else going on that you care about. So there's all sorts of ways we can tweak things. I also like the idea of building something together. Building something that lasts is a truly meaningful effort, whatever it is. If you want to build a chair that someone's going to have in their house for 100 years, that's great. If you want to band together and help people build housing for people who are low income, that's great as well. If you just want to build a website, you've got the tech knowledge, and you see a group that's trying to gain recognition, website and social media stuff can help. Whatever it is, we have something that we can work with other people to build something that's bigger than anything we can do on our own. And finally, a little pet project of mine, meaningful work. Can we do something in our lives? We trade a huge amount of our lives. Just think of how many times your heart's going to beat and how many of those you kept beating at work. That's a big point. You have a finite number of breaths, days, minutes in your life, and you can spend a bunch of them sleeping, which I know we all wish we didn't have to. And then the next biggest chunk, sometimes the biggest chunk, is work. Why would you trade away that much of your life for something that's meaningless? Get something back in the bargain. And through getting that piece of meaning back, you'll actually expand your ability to make an impact as well. So use the best of you to benefit the greater good. In what ways can you use your strengths and what you do really well to just take one extra little step beyond the confines of your job description in a way that delivers some sort of benefits to other people? This is a classic idea that just says, you know what, sometimes all it takes is just one little tweak. And finally, recraft your organization to give others this chance. If you're lucky enough to be able to influence a group or an organization, you can help foster that sense of meaning among other people by the way that you organize the group, by the way that you put together meetings, by the way that you do performance updates, by the way that you build teams. There's ways to create meaning in organizations that you can start from the top. So I'll just give one quick example of using the best in you to benefit the greater good. So you probably have all seen this sort of thing. This is where we want to create meaningful activity, meaningful work activities for people who have developmental disabilities, for instance. So there's a place called Blue Sky Recyclers in Denver, Colorado. So it's very close to where I work. And the man who started this company initially started as your typical sort of hazardous materials recycler, recycling motherboards from computers, all these sorts of things with the toxic cadmium, heavy metals, all these problematic materials that need to be handled very carefully if we're going to reclaim them so they don't seep into our groundwater. He also had a brother with autism and watched what happened as they, and I worked in this field for a while too, find the sheltered housing, find the sheltered work site, and it suddenly dawned on him that everyone in his brother's life more or less was paid to be in his brother's life. Even his bosses and coworkers. He said, let's just change that. So what does my brother do well? What does other people do well that some people don't like? Well, someone with autism oftentimes can work on dismantling a computer motherboard to a degree that would exhaust the rest of us. So they created an extremely high-performing computer parts recycling center solely populated with workers not who are being given a safe place to work or something to do all day long, but who are the star employees. When they go to work, they have to work shorter hours because they're so intense on it. They're valued for exactly what they do and exactly who they are. And so you see within autism, right? Autism has this tinge of social disconnect, right? Folks with autism not particularly interested in relationship building, not going to smile and make eye contact. In this work site, they do. Naturally, they make connections with their coworkers because they're all doing something important. They feel respected for who they are. A little bit of a twist, right? Because a lot of times in these sheltered work sites, we have people dismantling things, putting things together, taking them apart again. But here it's just saying, well, what can we do to treat this person as a person? A simple shift makes a world of difference when we apply it to the workplaces. So, if we reflect on everything, about our lives, about the lives of those around us, about this bizarre world we've inherited that seems to be changing so fast, it's easy to think about what we don't have. It's easy to think about opportunities we've missed or opportunities other people have that we don't have. If we just focus on what we've been given some elements that somehow came to life, that somehow come together to create differences among all of us, that somehow came together to create ways in which we interact in societies. We've only got so much of them, we've only got so much time. But I would argue in our lives, in our quest to have lives that are truly worth something, we've been given everything we'll ever need. We've been given all the proper elements for a life full of meaning. So the question is, what are we going to do with it? Hopefully you'll consider meaning. In either case, thank you for your time and for coming out tonight.